Let's talk to Peter Hitchens about it, columnist at the Mail on Sunday. Peter, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
I mean, you know better than most, I suspect, what's happened to the police in this country. They seem to have become infiltrated by activism. They seem to have been sort of captured, if you like, by the wokeists. When we watched, I don't know if you saw it yesterday, the press conference with the Chief Constable of Essex Police, B.J. Harrington, a man so pompous he could almost disappear up his own backside, who seemed to think that he had done nothing wrong, seemed to think it was perfectly acceptable to escort left-wing activists from out of town to a place where local people were demonstrating.
Yeah, the police have not just been infiltrated. That would be a grave underestimate of what's happened.
Yeah,
It's now 22 years since I wrote a book called The Abolition of Liberty, in which I described the results, for instance, of the Scarman report into the supposed riots in Brixton back in the 1980s. Yeah. And then, of course, the Macpherson report into the murder of Stephen Lawrence, both of which were pretexts, these events, for a politically correct inquisition into the police to remove what remained very conservative elements in them and to turn them into the army of political correctness, which they now are. This is part of this. If you want to know what's really wrong with this country, fundamentally the decision was taken beginning in the 1960s to abolish the idea of personal responsibility, to explain all crime as some kind of reaction to bad social conditions or abuse or whatever it might be, and to cease to enforce law as law is to cease to get rid of the old concept of punishment. As it were, the working maxim of the prison system in this country used to be the due punishment of responsible persons. And you see the whole point of that. People were assumed to be responsible for their own actions. If they committed crimes, they could then be duly punished according to law. That's not what happens anymore. There's a fantasy about rehabilitation. Prisons are not supposed to be for punishment. And of course, they fail completely in this. And at the same time, the police, who were supposed to be on the streets representing the desire of the population for peace and order and the repression of crime and disorder, have changed into a body of uniformed and almost armed social workers now. Yeah. Paramilitary social workers was the phrase I used, and which people have begun to realize is largely true. Right. So that's what you see. You may have grown up with one idea of the police force, but they're not like that anymore, and there's no point in expecting them to do so. I was alarmed by what you reported earlier, them saying they couldn't cope with major civil disorder. That's a ridiculous, defeatist thing to say in the first place. And if you really are that badly equipped and unable to do it, the best thing to do is keep quiet about it.
I would thought so.
Shout about it, and go quietly to ministers and say, can we have more resources? But I keep saying the problem with the police is not resources. There are more police in this country, both as an absolute number and per head, than more or less than there've ever been. There've been some peaks and troughs, but basically since the turn of the century, at least, the huge numbers of police now exist. But it's what they do that's the problem. And then one of the problems with them is, of course, they're not out on the streets as individuals, getting to know people, reassuring them, making it clear they're on the side of the public. They never see the public except in bad circumstances. So their relations with them are poor. Their intelligence about what's going on is poor. And their ability to react to events and indeed to foresee events is poor. But to say they're ill-equipped for civil disorder seems to me to be a very unwise thing to do, even if it's true, which I honestly doubt. There are many, many of them. The mystery has always been, or not always, but at least for the past 20 years, what is it that they do?
But this is the problem, isn't it? Because when we do see lots of police out and about, there's never a shortage of them. When they need to mass. I mean, even in Epping, when they turned up mob-handed and they decided it was a good idea to put crash helmets on and go into full kind of riot gear mode, that in many ways was more provocative than had they not done it.
You certainly can, by unskilled policing. You can raise the temperature of events. I haven't been to Epping, so I can't really comment on whether that happened there. There's a lot of dispute about what's going on. But I do think that one of the main problems of the police is that they're now so out of touch with the law-abiding majority, because they've ceased to be part of that law-abiding majority. They've become a special body outside the public, and in many cases oppose it. They don't share the public's views about what should be done about crime.
Right.
So, which is one of the reasons why one of the moments they can be absolutely guaranteed to turn up is when somebody has done what they call taking the law into their own hands and, say, enforced the law against a burglar in their house.
Yeah.
In a way which most people would have thought was reasonable, but which, of course, challenges the police monopoly. The police don't want that kind of treatment of burglars. They want the social work, all crimes explained by conditions view to be taken, rather than the old-fashioned view that if you break into somebody's house, you've done something wrong and you should be punished.
Right. But it's a bit like the whole migrant conversation, isn't it? You know, they see in Essex, for example, the police chief clearly sees the villains of the peace are the people protesting outside the migrant hotel, rather than the policy that's led people to be able to come to this country unfettered, be given, in the case of the Mail splash this morning, you know, cars that they can gamble on and live the sort of life of Riley while paying for absolutely nothing. You know, there's nothing wrong with them.
I don't particularly want the police to be making political statements of any kind.
No.
I don't want them to if they have political attitudes, I want them to keep them to themselves. Everybody's entitled to have political opinions, including individual police officers, but I don't want to know what they are. I want them to enforce the law.
Exactly.
And therefore, that, for me, that's not a big deal. What worries me is that we discover that the police have got these attitudes and that these influence the way in which they police these events.
Right.
But how one resolves this, I absolutely don't know. The country has now allowed into its borders very large numbers of people who were not here before, of whom we know very little, and for whose lives we seem to be paying very large amounts.
And who are causing a great deal of disruption to everybody's everyday lives.
It's not surprising people are discontented about this, particularly the less well-off. But I think you and I have a very great responsibility not to make this any worse.
No, that's true. But all I'm doing is highlighting the fact that people up and down the country, and it's going to, you don't have to be Nostradamus to predict that it's going to happen in more places. You know, we've got a film coming in there from Aldershot that I just played, with Hampshire Constabulary escorting masked men into an area where there's a demonstration going on, which seems to me to be completely and utterly ridiculous. If you want to add fuel to a flame, that's what they're doing.
Yeah, it's the masking is perhaps the most alarming part of it, because it really is quite wrong for people to be going around the streets.
Well, it's illegal. I mean, there was legislation passed in 2024, which we quoted, which gives the police the power to direct people to either remove their face coverings or to even seize them in places where they conceal their identity.
I took note of that. It made me smile slightly because of the period when we were all being told we had to wear masks all the time.
Well, I mean, I've often said, Peter, that, you know, there was a time when people that wore masks were treated with suspicion. During COVID, you were treated with suspicion if you weren't wearing one.
Well, indeed, and in all those Western films we watched as children, the baddies were always masked, weren't they? It's the masked people were the bad guys. I don't know. There's so many people going around with masks, and I see all the time, for instance, people riding around on electric motorbikes.
Yes. Well, you've written about that this morning, I've seen.
Yeah, well, I did. They're masked up to the eyeballs.
Yeah.
And why is that? You don't know. It's not that cold.
No.
Even at the speeds they ride them, why are they doing it? Why is nobody paying any attention to this? This
well, network? I noticed your piece
around our cities doing this all the time. This is the thing the police might be doing, stopping them and asking them exactly what.
Yeah.
Are you delivering a cheeseburger, sir, or is there something else in your bag?
Yeah.
And may I have a look at it?
Exactly.
Oh, good heavens! This is an illegal substance. Oh well. Let's not do anything about that.
Let's not worry about it. Yeah, because your piece,
law, and then you don't enforce laws of that kind for 20 or 30 years. You don't enforce the laws against public disorder. You let people behave very, very badly in the street all the time, particularly in the abandoned areas where the poor live. And that's the thing. When you go to parts of the country where the poor live, and where a lot of these migrants are being housed as well. And what is the word which comes to mind when you go to these areas? They're abandoned. Yeah. Authority has abandoned them. It offers no help, no comfort, no protections to the people. And at the same time, as I see, you've had decades of neglect by the forces of law and order in which bad behaviour has not been restrained. it wouldn't be surprising if terrible things happened following that. But as I say, I really think that we have to be very, very careful not to do or say anything which might make that worse.
No, true. But I mean, it's not.
Disorder is a terrible thing. It benefits absolutely.
Yeah, but it's equally not. It's equally
the areas where it happens, and it spreads fear and despondency, and it does enormous damage to everybody involved. And
absolutely, but it's not your fault. To avoid it. Peter, it's not your fault if there's, exacerbated violence in the land. And it's not my fault either. But unfortunately, people like the Chief Police Constable of Essex Police is the kind of guy that would blame you for it and say, look, there's a reason why these people have rioted. It's nothing to do with the migrants. It's nothing to do with their unhappiness about the way that we've policed the event. It's nothing to do with the fact that they've got nothing and they see migrants getting everything for free. It's all to do with Peter Hitchens, who wrote a piece in the newspaper that made them all, enraged, right? But your piece today reminded me of something that happened to me yesterday. The drug dealers that shot past me at 40 miles an hour, and why I feel we're not being told how many people have been killed in e-bike crashes. A guy went, I was working quite late yesterday. I was driving home in rush hour about sort of 6:30 or so, 5:30, something like that. A guy went past me on a road in London in a bike lane. He must have been doing 50 miles an hour. He was going so fast, I was actually worried that if he crashed into something, he would be dead. It was unbelievable. And you see this every day now.
It's the biggest change in our road traffic laws, really, since the 1930s. It's a gigantic change, and also it's a gigantic social change as a result, because it's made the country instantly hugely less safe. The whole basis of road safety in this country has been really since the 1930s that all vehicles that had motors carried large recognizable number plates, and that you weren't allowed to drive or ride motor vehicles unless you'd passed a test. And that was a very simple rule, and it kept us reasonably safe, and it reduced road casualties when it was introduced. This has now been abandoned completely for electric motorbikes, e-bikes as they're misleadingly called. Yeah. And it's also been abandoned for e-scooters, which, although some of them are still technically illegal, the ones which are owned privately, you very rarely see this law being enforced. And the others, which are hire bikes, which you can pick up all over the place, are totally legal, and they are motor vehicles, and they are ridden and driven by people who've got no qualifications to do so, and they don't carry number plates, so they can behave as they like, break all traffic rules. Nothing will happen to them. Cameras won't pick them up, right. And if people want to use them in the commission of crime, they can't be traced. And it's a huge social and political and moral change in our society, which makes us much more like our city is much more like the cities of Southeast Asia, where traffic is chaotic and quite dangerous. And it's made particularly the pavements extremely dangerous for the vulnerable, especially for the blind and partially sighted. And there's been no discussion of it in Parliament. It's been in nobody's manifesto that I know, and yet this huge social change has happened, and it's almost impossible to get anybody to be interested in it. Well, yesterday, the Daily Mail reported that ministers are beginning to worry about it. Yeah. But when you look at what they said, they were making very, very mild promises. But what I think is happening is that more and more members of Parliament, and this is exactly as it should be in my view, are getting their email inboxes flooded with people saying, what are you doing about these e-bikes and e-scooters, which are all over my town, one of which nearly knocked me over yesterday, or a rider of one mugged someone in front of me only the other day. Yeah. What are you doing about it? I think the government is quietly getting worried. What amazes me is that so few of my colleagues in the media have paid any attention to this vast social change going on around them. But I should be used to this. I've been writing about vast social changes in this country going on without anybody paying any attention to them now for about a quarter of a century. So I suppose this latest one shouldn't be a shock. I see you're showing a film of police stopping riders of these vehicles, but I have to tell you, this is very rare.
It is very rare, yeah.
I ride around London. I'm constantly seeing, particularly e-bikes, vehicles which aren't the supposedly e-bikes, which are officially classified, believe it or not, as bicycles, so they can ride through the royal parks as if they were push bikes. And they're got up to look like motorbikes.
The ones with the huge wheels.
Huge wheels, great fat tyres, and the people who ride them, again, masked to the eyeballs and unidentifiable, and the speeds at which they're capable. I know people say, well, they're all limited. People will say it's 15.5 miles.
No, they're not. They're really not.
they're not, because all you need to do is tinker with it a bit. The place is full of people who can do that. Why isn't there more of a fuss about
I know.
this?
Well, listen, I mean, myself and Nick Freeman.
What are our colleagues in the media doing? Just letting this go as if nothing was happening.
Yeah, I know. Well, because they're all also captured by this wokeism, where they think, you know, well, if it's electric, it must be good for the planet, so we must just encourage it. Myself and Nick Freeman, right, the lawyer, put a petition into Parliament to register every single scooter, e-bike, and all the rest of it, every single thing that goes on the roads as we do in cars. And it was rejected by Parliament on the grounds that, oh, we've already got one that's a bit similar, which doesn't appear to have gone anywhere either. You know, so they're just not interested.
In fact, what they've got is something is the complete opposite, because it is, as I say, with electric motorbikes, there is a blind eye is turned to the existence of thousands of these things, which are immensely powerful and, as you say, capable of enormously high speeds and are heavy. If you were hit by one, it would be very, very serious. Also, I tried to get statistics from the Department of Transport some months ago on this. I haven't done it recently, but the reply that I got then was that there were no central statistics held.
So it's hopeless, absolutely hopeless.
And surely, if you introduce an enormous change of this kind in traffic rules, you should monitor it. We're supposed to be having experiments on e-scooters. Since 2020, it's been an experiment in my hometown and lots of others. But I constantly ask, where are the details of this experiment? What are the results? Who's monitoring it? And the answers that you get, even under freedom of information, are tremendously vague.
Yeah.
I don't think it's an experiment at all. I just think they want to carry on doing it so long that people get used to it and give up.
Oh, I think so.
Well, if you don't like it, and I think an awful lot of people don't, there's a very easy thing to use on any computer called writetothem.com, write to them all one word, which will give you the way to contact your local representative or your member of parliament, and write politely and briefly to them saying, what are you doing about this? Because I think they really do need to know. I think there's a lot of discontent. I think they really do need to know that it is so. And it's time it was debated properly in Parliament, and it's time that proper restrictions were placed upon it.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I think a lot of people would agree as well. Peter, got to rush. Thank you very much indeed. Peter Hitchens there, columnist at the Mail on Sunday, big piece in the paper this morning.